All right, and we are live on the Fletch Entertainment Network. Myself, Fletch, and Randy, the Skags. Look at him. Look at that beard. He's all Duck Dynasty on us.
Oh yeah, another year and grayer and older and fatter.
There you go. I got some of that going for me. Actually, all three. So this is our college football preview. We might do a couple of these before the season gets started. There's so much to talk about. We don't have all the time in the world to do it this time, so we're gonna touch on the teams we like. Obviously, for people that are familiar with the show, I'm a Buckeye guy. He's a Bama guy. Go Roll Tide, go Bucks. But we don't we're not homers. You know, if our team's stinking, then our team is stinking. Just fortunately, they haven't really done that a whole lot lately. So, and this is the year of the 12 team playoff. Everything is upside down. Saban's gone. Harbaugh's gone. Michigan's under some kind of a microscope. I mean, crazy things, portals, nuts. What do you think about the season coming up? What's your impressions?
Well, the upcoming season, we had been talking for the last couple of years actually about this whole NIL thing and how it was going to affect football. And now we are, we're seeing it, right before our very eyes unfolding, much like that, much like we thought it would. And of course, this season's, lots of questions, changes, um, conferences. The SEC now has Oklahoma and Texas. So that's going to be interesting. The Big Ten now has Oregon and USC and UCLA too.
Yep, and
So
Washington.
in Washington, okay. So
Yeah,
so there's going to be a lot of changes going on with all that. And like you were saying, we have the 12-team playoff now. That's going to be interesting how that's going to play out. But I think it'll be better overall as far as the 12-team playoff part of it. But the whole NIL thing and all the changes that we've had, like I said, the NIL thing is exactly what we thought it would be. Um, you know, Changes for the programs. I mean, your team, Ohio State. I mean, they haven't had much changes, and they've had great recruiting, and pretty much everybody's got Georgia and Ohio State 1 and 2.
yeah,
Going one way or the other because there's so many questions with the other teams. Michigan, with Harbaugh gone, they have questions. Alabama with Nick Saban gone, lots of questions there. So definitely going to be an interesting season.
yeah. Who would have thunk when we were headed towards this that things that we did know happened, and then things we probably couldn't have never predicted happened, and here we are. And Kirby Smart is high on the totem pole in the SEC as far as he's got two national championships under his belt. They were back to back. Saban's gone. All of a sudden, Ole Miss is seeing some talking points that their team to beat this year, along with a lot of people think it's going to be Georgia and Ole Miss. Another thing about all these conferences is they're all straight up and down. There's no divisions anymore, so there is
Right.
no east and west of everything, and that's
Right.
interesting.
A lot of the picks in the SEC are Texas and Georgia.
Yep, Texas up there too. There's no doubt. A lot of people are wondering what Texas is going to look like in the SEC. I think they'll be fine just because they got great recruiting. They got an SEC head coach as a coordinator from Alabama. So I don't see them struggling in the SEC. I'm not saying they're going to win all the games. I'm just saying I think they're going to be competitive big time. I think OU could be competitive, but I think they probably won't be as good as Texas at the end of the season. Their record will be a little less. They got a gauntlet too, almost as bad as Florida as far as who they got to go through
Right. Right.
to get. And I think is it OU and LSU like one of the first weeks of the season or something like that. Somebody's playing LSU in LSU. I think it's Oklahoma, but I could be wrong.
There is, like the second or third week of the season is just crazy. I mean, there is just, and I don't have it in front of me to look at, but there's some incredible matchups
Yeah,
going on. And I would like I said, we're going to have to look it up and see what exactly are. But I know the second or third week has some great matchups
yes,
that'll probably definitely I know it's early, but could certainly have an impact on how they're going to be ranked and at the end there, whether they're in the top 4 or the top 12.
yeah. It's going to be extremely interesting. Do you want to flip a coin to see who's going to win the Pac-12? It's
Oh,
only teams in the Pac-12. I looked on ESPN. There's still a conference, two teams. Pac-12. I'm like, There's a place I know they got like crazy, but wow, it's Washington State and Oregon State. So they've already put a clause in there where you have to have a number of teams to be able to be eligible for the top 4 conference winners get a bye. They can't be one of them. That's just the way it goes. They're gonna really have a hard time, no matter what, getting in just because of who they play. They don't play enough teams because they're not in a big conference anymore. Another realignment, so to speak, that we didn't talk about in the beginning was SMU going to Florida, going to the ACC. A lot of people are high on SMU fitting well in that conference based on the recruiting and the resources they've done. They're right there in Dallas, I think. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, Stanford and Cal, I think, joined that league. I think that's it. Just 3 additionals, if I'm not mistaken. Unless there's another team I can't think of. And then, of course, I think it was last year the Big 12 added all their teams. And now they're adding. They added more this year. They added Utah, Colorado, a couple others. It's nuts. We'll have to go through realignment like crazy, but who would have thought the Big 12 would have more teams in the SEC? But they do. They have the same. They both have 16, I think, and then the Big 10 has 18. These super conferences and no division. So there's no, from a Big 10 standpoint, there is no Northwestern, Iowa, Wisconsin trio running into the Big 10 championship game every year automatically because they play out in the West of the Big 10. That's no more. So all those teams automatically have a harder path to get to the Big 10 championship because now it's straight up and down. And the likes of Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, Oregon all sit at the top is what most people are saying. Maybe not in that order, but that's who they're all sitting at the top. So,
well, from most everything I've seen in the Big 10, in my opinion, also, it's going to Ohio State's always there. I mean, they have been for the last 10, 12 years, whatever it's been. They're going to be there, and the last couple of years it became a Michigan-Ohio State thing, which was really kind of cool, I thought, because hey, man, we got a good rivalry here. It's back. We got a battle. And I always thought the Big Ten kind of needed that because prior to that, it was Ohio State. Yep. And at the end of the season, you pretty much knew it was going to be Ohio State.
Yep.
So now looking at it, a lot of people are real high on Oregon. So we'll kind of see how that works out. Of course, we got USC. I don't know a whole lot about that. I guess I need to brush up on some of that stuff. It is early, but right now, everybody's looking at either and if you look at all the preseason, whatever it means, if it means anything, the preseason stuff, and they have the in the top 4 teams they have both Ohio State and Oregon.
Right.
And that's everything I've seen. So, and I think Oregon has to come to Ohio State.
Other way around.
Ohio State has to go to Oregon.
Yeah. That's like October 12th, I think. That's a big weekend for all of college football as far as great games.
Well, maybe that's
one of them.
Maybe that's the weekend that I'm thinking of that had.
Okay.
You had sent me something on.
Yeah, I think that's October 12th.
Okay, maybe that's what it was. So a little bit later in the season than I actually thought originally.
I can't remember exactly all the teams on that, but it was pretty nuts. And I'm not sure if that's the whiteout night in Penn State, but the whiteout game, whenever it is Washington at Penn State. And, there's so much that people are, I've heard, I'm sure you have heard, on the radio, they say, Michigan's number 1. They should be number 1 until they're knocked off. I don't believe that for a second. I don't care who you are. That's all last year. This year is totally different. There's a lot of turnover on that team. And I'm not just picking on Michigan. There's a lot of turnover. If you look at teams that don't have a lot of turnover in certain areas like quarterback and stuff, Georgia certainly sits up there. Carson Beck is back. He had a really good year last year. They did lose Brock Bowers, but that doesn't mean they don't have somebody behind him that can play there. Maybe not be Brock Bowers, but be good enough. Right. But Ohio State having what I would consider subpar play at quarterback last year, and that's by the standards of C.J. Stroud, Justin Fields, and Dwayne Haskins. McCord, even though he only lost 1 game, he didn't light up the scoreboard with numbers, the stat sheet and stuff. He's gone. He went to Syracuse. And they got a transfer from K-State, and they got a bunch of young guys, including Julian Sayin coming over from Alabama when Saban left. So there's a lot of questions in the quarterback room. And if you don't have a good quarterback that can do stuff, you're going to have a hard time, even now having a harder time getting through your conference, even though it's going to be easier to get into the Final 12. you would think, well, nobody really knows, if there's 12 teams, if 4 come from the Big Ten and 4 come from the SEC, that only leaves 4 left, and one of them's got to be the Power 5, highest ranked Power 5 champion. And then if Notre Dame has a good year, then you're talking only 2 spots left. So it's going to be weird, but I think ultimately it's going to be still a lot of people crying about not getting in, even if it's 12.
Well, I mean, I'm sure the ACC will have somebody in there.
Right. Yeah. I forgot about them. And, Florida State, Clemson, and Humel. I mean, Georgia Tech's supposed to be a good team this year. They really turned it on last year. Miami. That's Miami, too. You got a bird?
No, I got a bird. It's Miss Cheryl, my wife, my lovely
wife. Okay.
She says hello.
Hello.
Howdy.
Yeah. So, she came in and she looked and she seen, oh, it's Randy and Fletch. Oh, geez.
It's that time of year again.
Yeah. So, but anyways, going back to a lot about what you were saying, I mean, you're exactly what happened here.
What's up? Did I miss you?
Oh, yeah, kind of. I think my screen kind of went wacko on me just for a second. But,
okay.
So it'll be, it'll be real interesting with all that. I think that, Alabama, of course, their quarterback's back. He was, he had a great season last year. I personally, being an Alabama fan, I'm still not convinced on this guy. And you were talking about, the Big Ten and Michigan should be number 1. But I'm with you on that. I don't agree with that at all. I think it's kind of like, Michigan kind of had the perfect storm last year. Things kind of went their way, and, in the Ohio State game, things kind of went their way. In the playoff game against Alabama, it came down to a bad snap on the final play.
Right.
So Michigan, things went well for Michigan, but like you said, with what they lost and Harbaugh being gone, the new guy coming in, even though he did coach some games last year,
right?
They still had that personnel, and they still had Harbaugh in the background, pushing all the keys and everything. So yeah, I mean, I don't think Michigan is going to be in the top of the Big Ten this year. I think it's probably Penn State may be ahead of Michigan, actually. And my thing with Penn State, going over all Big Ten stuff here, but my thing with Penn State, they always put them up there, but they seldom end up, in the top. Well, now they could very well be in the top 12, but when it was the top 4. That I just never did see that was going to happen. So, I mean, that certainly opens things up as far as what you're saying. They had, whether they have 4 teams from one division and 4 from another. But gosh, I mean, in the past, now this is the past, the strength of the SEC, I mean, heck, they could have had 5 or 6 teams in that 12-team playoff if they took the very best teams in the way that they had them ranked.
Right.
So
they this year, for people that don't know, the top 4 teams are conference winners. The top 4 conference winners, the highest ranked conference winners, they are the winners, and they get a bye. Then it's the next 4 teams, no matter where they're from. So if it's another 1 from or 2 from each of certain conferences, that's where it could be starting stacked against others. A lot of people. I hate saying a lot of people. I hear a lot of talk on the radio, and talk is cheap, So a lot of talk think ACC 1, maybe 2, and 1 would be the conference winner, and then but they're not going to be one of the ones that get a bye. They're saying, so to speak. Big 12 is the same way. They'll get 1 in, but it will be could be up because you only get 4 byes. The next 4 teams that don't get byes all get home games, so that's kind of cool for them. If you're a Penn State and you don't win the Big Ten and you got a home game, I mean, that game is probably going to be what you and I saw when Auburn played there. One crazy place to go in and try to win the game. So, and there's a few other places that can be like that as well. LSU. If LSU is a second-tier SEC team, good luck going to Death Valley and getting a win.
Good luck going to Penn State or LSU for that.
Right. So
that's got to be 2 of the toughest places to play in the country.
There's no doubt. The atmospheres there are nuts as much as anybody. I think Gainesville is usually a nut atmosphere, but I don't know if they got the horses this year. And we'll get into their schedule on another show because they have a crazy SEC schedule they got to play for Florida. That's going to be absolutely nuts. But if they come out on top of most of that, they're going to be really sitting nice. But how do you feel just in general about Alabama with Saban stepping down? You may or may not know a lot about Caleb DeBoer or whatever, but just in general, it feels like to me at first it's like people were running away from Alabama as far as portals, but then it seemed like they kind of reeled it back, got some back in, and I think it sounds like they're pretty good position, most feel like, to be pretty decent, even though Saban's not there. And I've heard grumblings, so to speak, for lack of a better term, that the quarterback is a preseason Heisman candidate, which I thought was a little much for him. I thought he definitely was a better quarterback in the second half than he was in the first half, but let's not forget 4th and 31 is how they got into the playoff, which was a crazy play that had to have been some of the worst coverage. And I don't know if they rushed anybody on that because he was back there for a long time.
And that was the problem. It wasn't the coverage. I mean, the guy was there, but, he had so much time to throw that ball.
Right.
I mean, I don't care how good how many defensive backs you got back here. If the guys are able to run around, somebody's going to get.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it was. It was contended by the defensive guy, but it just happened to be a perfect throwing ball. He had a lot of time. I'm sure if they had that do over again, they would rush a heck of a lot more people.
Yeah, I mean, get in there and make him make a decision quick instead of sitting back there, because that was a long play. I don't know how many seconds it was, but it seemed like it went forever.
Yeah,
and like you said, if you got back there all day, I don't care how many people you got in the backfield, especially when you're not on the goal line. That's a little different when you're that close. They're 31 away. I mean, they had plenty of room to spread out and get people open. That's exactly what they did, and he made a heck of a throw. So that was they earned it. I mean, but it was interesting to call him an early Heisman guy, and I'm not saying he's not, because I do think he's got the talent, and obviously if he's at Alabama, they saw something in him for sure.
Yeah. Well, and you were asking me, my thoughts on Alabama with the Nick Saban thing and all that. Look, I wasn't real. I've been an Alabama fan for, what are we going on now? Over 50 years, and so I've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly. I really think Nick Saban screwed Alabama. Not so much that he retired. He retired. He deserved retirement and all that. It was the way he did it, and even more so, the timing.
Yeah.
The timing was horrible, and it kind of killed him as far as recruiting and that kind of stuff. And like you were saying, right off the bat, guys were leaving. Recruiting wasn't going well. Well, the guy was able to come in and regroup some of that. You mentioned that, and regroup some of that and bring some of it back. But they still lost some key people, to Ohio State, to Georgia. They lost people to the top 4 teams in the country.
I mean, losing Caleb Downs I thought was pretty big because he had a great season. He's pretty much established excellent safety. Losing Julian Sayin, that's going to be interesting because he was going to be a freshman prospect, a couple of years. It's almost like when Ohio State was kind of counting on Quinn Ewers, and then he bolted. And because they didn't have things lined up, they ended up with Kyle McCord and nobody else, except the 2 guys last year that came in when McCord was out, and it was ugly. So I don't know how that's set up for Alabama. I'm not sure. I'm not really familiar with who they got behind, the guys that are there now, but they are like, and I can't remember who was the first coach that they went after that didn't want to come to Alabama. I can't remember who it was. It wasn't Lanning, was it? Did he say I'm going to stay in Oregon? Is that right? Dan Lanning?
Well, I can't remember.
Yeah.
I know they're after somebody, an offensive guy, I believe.
Yeah,
offensive mind.
I'd have to look that up because they settled on Caleb DeBoer, but wasn't right away. And I thought that might have hurt him a bit. But like I said, he really got in there and kind of put a drain plunge in the drainage. And then he got some more transfers back. And I think I really think they'll be fine. To sit there and say, is it going to be Saban? Nobody would want anybody to ever say that about anybody. Nick Saban's Nick Saban, and we may never see, at least in our lifetime, somebody win 7 national championships with the same team or whatever. Was it 7 with them?
Yeah, I mean, coaching definitely makes a difference. We've seen it, and especially in Alabama. Prior to Nick Saban, the way things were going for several years, and 3 or 4 different guys coming in, we didn't see that. So I mean, he was certainly special, and he knew how to win games. He knew how to motivate. He knew, and he adapted from what he always knew, which hey, we're going to run the football and play defense. I mean, he adapted from that,
Yep.
and he surrounded himself with the right people, and that's the key thing in college football. But I mean, it's going back to the Alabama thing. Um, you know, I don't think they're going to be quite what they were. I still think there's going to be some transition here. I think maybe this guy a little bit more offensive minded than Nick Saban was. Nick Saban was always a defensive guy. So, I mean, there's definitely going to be a change over there. I see him losing a couple of games probably. Do they get in the top 12? Maybe in that last 3 or 4 spots, possibly.
Right.
I mean, I hope they do better than that, but you just got to be realistic about, hey, all these changes are going to have an effect on on what's going on, and so certainly that, and then back to you, a question for you. We have Ohio State, which has probably one of the most talented teams in the country. And and we have this quarterback question. So I mean, how do you feel they're going to fill that?
Well, that's going to be interesting. I like most think it's going to be, at least in the beginning, it's going to be the guy from K-State, just because he's got multiple years of experience and he's played in championship games. He won the Big 12 when Taylor Martinez, who came from over from Nebraska, when he went down, he filled in and did nicely for him. But he's not like a 5-star quarterback. He's a great runner and he's big, so he can bounce people a little bit. He's got a decent arm, but it's not. He's no Kyle McCord. He's no Kyle McCord actually, but he's no C.J. Stroud. He's no the dude that was Alabama. I can't think of his name. No Tua.
Yeah.
So a lot of people are thinking, oh, he'll start a season. Julian Sanders going to jump people. I don't know anything about any of that. But what really matters, especially if he's going to play halfway good, and it was a problem last year, is the offensive line. And they're trying to address it. They've been talking about it. And we all know that you're not going to do anything on either side of the football if you don't have a good line on both sides, which is the staple of Saban for so many years. And maybe last year was not the greatest lines he ever had total, So you know what I mean? Yeah. And that kills you. When you're quarterback and you're running, you can't get a running game going, and then your quarterback, it's ugly. So they really need to get a running game established. They got Judkins, I think his name is, from Ole Miss. He was a leader in SEC running backs last year. Keyshawn Judkins, I think his name is. And then of course they got everybody coming back last year on defense and a little bit of offense. Can't remember the guy's name. Who was Henderson. They got a couple really good guys at running backs, but it won't matter if there's no holes. So the offensive line is going to tell a lot for Ohio State. And what I was going to mention, what you were saying is, I think it's going to be hard, at least for this year and maybe a couple of years we're looking at, if for a while, for anybody to go through the Big Ten or the SEC and not lose a game in regular season. A lot of good teams.
With the way things are. I don't know about the Big Ten. I don't think Michigan's going to do what they've done the last couple of years.
Yeah.
Like I said earlier, the 10 state thing. I don't know. The big question of the Big Ten now is the teams that are coming in.
Right.
Oregon. USC. Those are the two big ones I see that could create problems amongst the top of the Big Ten. So,
sure.
To me, that's the biggest thing. Ohio State's going to be there. I don't think there's any question about that. And it's been hard for teams to compete with them. All the other teams, with the exception of Michigan, the last 2 years. It's going to be Ohio State. So, as far as the Big Ten goes, the teams coming in, that's going to be the most interesting thing in the Big Ten to me, is how that plays out. Ohio State, Oregon, what happens there? That's going to tell us a lot. My dog says hello, by the way.
Do you have a dog? I was just wondering.
Yeah, he likes to bark.
I was going to say, tell that girl, tell your wife to give him a treat.
Yeah.
Give him a biscuit.
Yeah, so that'd be the most interesting thing, and a little bit of the same thing with the SEC. The SEC's always been tough, because you have that LSU, Alabama, you have that Auburn, Alabama. And I don't care what their records are. I don't care. It doesn't matter. It's going to be a battle and home field advantage plays such a big part of that. Well, now we throw in Texas and Oklahoma, and everybody's real high on Texas, real high on Ewers, that Quinn Ewers guy, that came from Ohio State. I guess we can quit saying he came from Ohio State. He's been in Texas for a couple of years now. But
I mean, he's from Texas. He went to Ohio State because he couldn't get NIL in high school in the state of Texas. So he came to Ohio State, never did squat for one season, took a bunch of money, and went back to Texas. So he had. If people think that Joe Burrow doesn't deserve it in Ohio State, this guy really doesn't deserve it in Ohio State. He didn't do anything in Ohio State. At least Burrow was there for a few years trying to win the job.
Right. I mean, the fact that he was there,
right.
So if he does great and he wins the Heisman and all that stuff, I'll always be able to jab you and say, hey,
let him go.
Ohio State, you let him
go.
Yeah.
No doubt.
That's just that's just the way it is. So those will be the interesting things. We already know. In the Big Ten, it's been Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State, basically,
right,
for the most part. And when you go to the SEC, and it's been Alabama and Georgia and a mixture of some other teams. But I certainly think Texas is going to step up in that part. And and of course, we kind of leave them out. I mean, there is other conferences, but it's been a while since they've really made big noise. As far as national championship kind of material, but everybody's still high. We got Florida State. I just got a problem with the way Florida State handled the whole thing last year, and then they basically, in my opinion, embarrassed themselves. Playing a bowl game against Georgia. That was just, it's like, oh, we're still crying over this, and we're not going to be able to, got absolutely destroyed and embarrassed, in my opinion. I really, and I truly believe that a lot of that was coaching.
Yep.
The decisions and the way things went like that. I mean, why did the Georgia guys not do it? Why did the Alabama guys not do it? Why did I just have a problem with that. So
that was ugly all the way around. Them not getting in made a big stink, but they did lose their quarterback, which was a huge loss, a huge part. They won the ACC championship, but it was an absolute defensive deal against a team that wasn't a team light at all. So it's just kind of, I felt they made the right pick. They were probably the least of the four. They were probably number 5, so to speak. That's just, and it stinks, but you know what? It's not going to get any better because here's some interesting things that's going to happen this year to a certain degree. I don't know. Rutgers, who's not a perennial team that's figured to be any noisemakers in the national scene, they don't play Michigan, Oregon, Penn State, or Ohio State this year.
Nice.
They play, the toughest team is Iowa. They could be really close to undefeated when they play Iowa, and maybe only with 1 or 2 losses. Let's just say Oregon runs the table to get to the end or has 1 loss. I mean, how do they slot them when they haven't played the same caliber of teams that other teams that might have only had 1 loss? It's going to be interesting how conferences, because there's too many teams, they can't play everybody. So they're picking and choosing who they play. It's going to be really, I'm guessing that if you're tied with somebody, maybe your national ranking is what gets you, higher in your conference or I don't know how the conference are ranking for the conference championship, but then the CFP is going to go obviously on who they think is the eye test and all that. So we're going to get a lot of that too. So, from the Big Ten standpoint, I really think Ohio State and Penn State and Michigan in that order, as far as the 3 teams that are already and then you slot Oregon into that 4, probably 1 or 2. I think they should be really. They got that quarterback from OU, Dylan Gabriel. They're saying a lot of great things about people that are coming back and what Dan Lanning is an offensive-minded guy and yada, yada. So it'll be really interesting to see how they fit in. If they're undefeated in October when Ohio State goes out there and they beat Ohio State, then they're definitely in a good driver's seat. That game is going to be an early season. Who's going to put themselves up to 1? A lot of people think that Oregon and Ohio State are going to play 2 times, that game and then the Big Ten championship, and then maybe in the CFP again. Who knows? Because it'd be interesting. But it's going to happen in the SEC too. The guys, those teams will be beating each other up. I think more so than the Big Ten, because I think they got more good teams in the SEC right now. So I mean, you got Texas plays Alabama in Tuscaloosa because they played them last year and lost to them in Texas, right? Texas beat Alabama last year, like second game of the year or something, first game.
Yeah.
So this season it's in Tuscaloosa. That's a big game for Caleb Boer right out of the gate, week 1 or week 2. I think it's week 2. So
then they have Georgia too. Alabama and Georgia. So I mean they have 2 of the top 5, pre-ranked top 5 teams, and certainly they look that way on paper as far as their recruiting and returning and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, that's going to be 2 toughies right there.
And I think they play Ole Miss. I'm going to pull their schedule while we're talking. I think Ole Miss, and they play A&M. And as far as the teams mentioned, I think A&M was probably the least worry on that schedule. But at the same time, it's still A&M. I think whether it's a road game or not would be a big deal on that. It's just the one on the road in certain environments and all that. So, but
LSU, Auburn. I mean, they got a pretty tough schedule this year from the way it's gone in the past. And usually it's come down to maybe a couple of games, but this year it's going to be like 3 or 4.
So they play a couple of games: West Kentucky, South Florida. Then they go to Wisconsin. This is Alabama.
Right.
So that's a early season tough road test going up north. It's not should be too cold. Then it's still in September.
Right.
Then they play Georgia, and that's home at Tuscaloosa. Vanderbilt, South Carolina, Tennessee is a decent team. That's at Tennessee. We all remember what happened there 2 years ago. So if someone's still there, I would say, that ain't going to happen twice. I don't think it'll happen twice anyways, but that's, Missouri was a good team last year. They got to play them at home. LSU is at LSU, and then they play Oklahoma at Oklahoma, and then Auburn. They do not play Ole Miss, and they do not play A&M. I thought they played A&M, but I guess they don't. Must be somebody else. So that's a tough schedule. I mean,
where's the
much like most of the SEC. The Iron Bowl is it's at Alabama. It's a home game.
Good.
So that 4th and 31, that was in Auburn. I remember that last year. They were going.
One team that we haven't talked about that's been for several years. One of the most talked about teams, and in the top 10 and all that kind of stuff is Clemson. I'm not exactly sure how things are going to go there. Like I said, you said it's early, and I'm certainly going to have to brush up on some of these teams and some of these other divisions and stuff. But I'm sure we can't leave out Clemson. I mean, they've been there and been there and been there. So I wonder how that'll play out. And I don't know if Dabo has adapted.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Oh yeah.
To the transfer portal and the NIL, because he was he wasn't. Well, we're not going to do that. Well, he don't have any choice but to do that.
Yeah.
He wants to stay amongst the top 10 teams in the country.
There's no doubt that I heard. I think Sankey from the SEC basically say, if you're not on board, then you're getting left behind when it comes to NIL and the transfer portal. It's just what's happened. It's not what's going to happen. It's what's happening right now, and has been a little bit, and even more so. Restrictions are lifted. You can transfer whenever you want. There's no. It's nuts. It's a free agency. It's a different thing, but you got to embrace it. Otherwise, you're just going to sit there and watch everybody else get great players and pay great players and win more games than you win. It will be interesting to see where Clemson's going to fall in all this. Florida State was really good, but I don't think they're the same team. Now, that doesn't mean they can't be a really good team this year with different players. We'll see what the head coach, Mike Norvell, has them doing this year, but that'll be interesting, as well as I think Georgia Tech is a sleeper in that league, but they got that Haynes King guy that was at A&M but got banged up. And, I thought Georgia Tech was still doing 3 yards in a cloud of dust with the wishbone. They're not doing that anymore. They're lighting it up. So it'll be really interesting to see how they go in the ACC. North Carolina had a down year last year, so maybe they're going to bounce back. So they still got the head coach used to be at Texas, the old guy. I can't remember his name. Starts with an M, but anyways, so the Texas, the head coach that won with Vince Young, he's at North Carolina now. I can't remember his name. I think it starts with an M, doesn't it?
Mac Brown.
Mac Brown, there you go. That's him. Yeah, so he's in North Carolina. So they had somewhat of a down year compared to what they were hoping to have last year. So we'll see what's going to go on there. Pat Narduzzi and Pitt, always a good, tough fight, as well as West Virginia. It's just going to be what was West Virginia? No, they're in the Big 12 now. So, but Pitt's in the ACC. So, who knows? I mean, but the Big 10 and the SEC are really, in the spotlight with all the teams they got going into each conference and all the matchups. I mean, we got great games almost, if not for sure, every week. Where in years past, there's usually a week or so where you're like, ugh, but I don't think that's going to happen this year. We got some weeks where, I don't know, you got to have 4 TVs to see what's going on because there's so many games happening, especially that October 12th, I think it is. A lot of stuff happened that weekend.
Yeah, we'll have to look into, like I was saying, the Clemson thing. Another team that, we haven't talked about that we will coming up here that a lot of people are high on would be Oklahoma State. That's a team that, high expectations, all that stuff. They have that. And then, of course, you have to talk about Colorado.
Yeah. I refuse to call him Coach Prime.
Yeah, Deion Sanders coaching there. I mean, they certainly have some talent, but the quarterback, Shedder Sanders or whatever.
His son.
I'm not convinced that he's as great as what Deion says he is, or Coach Sanders says that he is, or whatever. But I mean, I have been impressed by watching him play some last year. So, some teams in there that could very well be, jump into that mix, and I'm sure they will. But that's I'll have to study up on those for the next show that we can talk about some of the other divisions and teams because I've been so locked in. What's going to happen in the SC? I kind of know what's going to happen in the Big Ten with the teams coming in. So unfortunately, other conferences kind of got pushed to the side, and I'm not trying to slide them or anything like that. But I think that the cream is certainly in the Big Ten and the SEC.
Yeah, I usually, by this time I'm not brushed up on who's where because every year it's worse and worse where who's where. He's had hard enough time keeping up with the team you like, let alone the conference that you're in. We'll get more familiar with what's going on as we get closer to the season for sure. For it comes to Colorado, I do think Shedeur Sanders has some really good athletic talent. There's no doubt. He's a big guy. He's got not big legs. He's fast. He's got a decent arm. I don't know if that translates into the NFL very well, and that's not a slight on him as much because, in college you can get away with scrambling around and hitting open guys. The NFL, as a lot of people find out, you got to read and react, and you got to look off the safety, and you got to, C.J. Stroud had a phenomenal year last year doing just that, and then again, it also goes to what team are you going to, how good is their system, how good is their structure, and he fell into a great team where the guy from Alabama, who I think is just as talented as CJ, he's on Carolina, and they just don't have everything set in place like they did for CJ. So he struggled a lot, but I don't think that means he's not as good.
Bryce Young.
Yeah, Bryce Young. Yeah. Even Tua injuries notwithstanding, took him a little bit to get things running and going, and he's looking pretty good in Miami. But at the same time, I don't know if Miami's got a good structure, but we don't really care about NFL anyway. So,
what you're talking about, the structure and the coaching and who they have in place and all that. I mean, that's just as true in college football as it is anywhere.
Right.
Kind of, we hit on that kind of earlier. You can have all the talent in the world, but if you don't have the guys in the right places to get the most out of that, you're gonna get knocked off by, quite frankly, probably a lesser team talent wise.
It was just a couple of years ago. Every week, you and I were like, okay, this is a week TCU is going to lose. Yeah. And they just kept winning and kept winning. Right. We were like, boy, we're just dead wrong. And that's a situation where good talent, but not the recruiting top 5 class, but still great talent, great coaching, and they're winning games that a lot of people didn't think they had any business winning. And they got all the way to the national title game and got boat raced by Georgia, who was a much better team anyways, but they beat the pants off of Michigan to get there. So very interesting. So it's not out of the realm possibility. There's no doubt. I think last year Colorado somewhat shocked everybody by beating the pants off of Nebraska, I think it was, or maybe it was whoever it was in week 1. I thought it was Nebraska, but then they won. They won like 3, and then that was it.
Nebraska was in a hot mess and a tailspin right off the bat. Anyways,
Yeah, no doubt.
yeah, that wasn't. And I mean, Colorado got off to that whatever 4-0 start before they lost 5 in a row or 6 in a row or whatever.
I mean, they came back down to earth pretty quick against really good team. They don't have much of a defense. I don't know what they look like this year because I think they got a whole lot of transfer portals again. So just going to come down to, did they get good players, good enough, and is their coaching good enough to make those guys get on the field and execute, at a high level? And that's the way it is with any team, really. You can have all the players you want, but especially in the line of scrimmage, if you can control the line of scrimmage, you can do a lot, and whether it's college or Canadian Football League, but college and pro for sure. But yeah, in college, if say no more than the quarterback for Alabama, they had all the time in the world to get that pass in the end zone against Auburn. That was the line. They didn't block, they didn't rush a whole lot. I guess I didn't have looked at the play, but he had all the time back there. I know we beat that one to death, but that was a heck of a 4th and 31. Everybody knows what that means.
Well, the history of that game, the history of the Iron Bowl.
Oh yeah,
I mean, that's the way it is. Now 4th and 31, kick 6, pick 6.
Yep.
It goes on and on and on for years and years and years. So, crazy stuff in that game is not uncommon.
Right, absolutely. So, no doubt. So, yeah, we'll be getting into other teams. Obviously, looking at the, we're not big on making predictions. That's not what we really do. We kind of tell you what we think is going to happen from week to week. We're not like guys that are running Vegas and parlays and all that. That's just not what we do here at the corner, in the corner. But we definitely usually have a good insight on what's going to happen in certain weeks. And it might have been a little easier in the past because, week to week, it's just like, okay, these top teams are going to beat the snot out of these untop teams. And yes, we're going to get at the end. It's going to be these teams there. And, got 12 teams going in now. So we're going to pretty much say we know what team's going to be there. And then there's going to be other teams we're not sure now. Just got to see how the season goes out. Because what happened last year don't mean squat. I mean, it's all last year's over. This is a new year. And in this day and age, a lot of players moving around, even more so than last year or the year before. It's getting worse every year. Yeah, and much to the chagrin of you and I, we're old school. We like the guys who can't play their freshman year, go to their senior year, then go to college. Those days are over. So,
like I said, so there'll be lots to talk about as it goes on, and it'll come down to where we'll certainly talk about those top 4, like the way it's been the last couple of years. But some of the most interesting things are going to be that 5 through 10, 5 through 12, 6 through because the top 4 or 5 are probably going to be the top 4 or 5 that we've seen over and over for the last several years, quite possibly. And then so the real interesting part as the season goes on will be that 6 through 12.
Right. It's one of the things I was thinking about is it's going to be interesting to see if anybody can go undefeated that actually plays top teams. Whether it's the SEC, or the Big Ten, and potentially other teams from other conferences versus a team that perhaps plays in a lesser conference that goes undefeated, but they're not going to be considered one of the top 4 because of who they played. I think a lot of teams, if not all of the top 4, could potentially be a one-loss team because it's just so much competition. And it's hard, and these are kids. Let's not forget all that. Even though they're going to be millionaires, they're kids still, and some kids inevitably are going to take the millions that they got and mess up their college careers by doing your Johnny Manziel-ish stuff. Where they don't take it seriously. Who knows? So I think 2 losses can still get in, depending on who you are and who you lost to. You won't be a top 4 team getting by, but you'll still get in because you lost to. Let's say you lost to Texas and Alabama, and those teams are in the top. That means your 2 losses were to it. So, yeah, it's going to be really different. Where before it's like 1 loss, that's it. 2 losses, you're not getting in because there's only 4 teams. Those days are over. So you could very well get a 2-loss team. Hard to imagine a 3, but you never know. With all these games, see how it shakes out. You just don't know.
Yeah, a 3 would be pushing, but most certainly a 2-loss team. Like we've seen it in the past that. A team sitting at 5 or 6 that lost to 1 and 3.
Right.
are they a top 14? Well, quite possibly they were. We've had that argument. So,
Right.
so definitely, a two-loss team, like you were saying, lost to, number one and number three or number four, number five.
Oh,
But,
yeah.
are they a top 12 team? Probably so.
Yep.
But, it'd be interesting to see how all that plays out. I'll be looking forward to it. It'll be a lot of fun.
One of the interesting things I also wanted to mention was um, Notre Dame is not in a conference, so they can go undefeated, and they will not be a top 14 because the top four CFP 12 teams are our conference champions. They get a bye, so Notre Dame go undefeated and still have to play an extra game, even though they'll host it. They'll still play that. That's what's kind of interesting. That I don't know if that's just more pressure being applied to them to join a conference, or if they'll eventually change that around, but it is a little bit unfair to them. No matter what, they're never going to get a bye and not in a conference. So that's kind of interesting the way that reads.
Absolutely.
So I'm not a big Notre Dame fan, so I'm not going to cry for them, but that is the reality of it. All right. Well, we'll call this one good for today. Good preseason. Lots to unwrap as we get headed towards, I think we're 2.5 weeks away. This the 24th is the first game. There's like 4 of them. One of them is Florida State and Georgia Tech. That'll be interesting to watch. The other 3 are directional Delaware or something. The teams that
Right.
and then I think Nevada might be playing that week or something. But and then the 29th, everything really gets rolling, and it's going to be an exciting season. I'm looking forward to it. I'm sure you are too. Lots of people out there too, and we'll be here to break it all down for you. So appreciate you, Randy. And anything you want to say to end it all?
No, like I said, it's going to be an exciting season. Lots of changes, lots of different things for us to look at and talk about, and of course, in the end, coming down to 12 teams, that's going to be so interesting to me. You could very well, I don't get the cart in front of the horse here, but I mean, you could very well have a team in that 10, I wouldn't say 12th spot, but that 9, 10 spot that could literally just beat the living daylights out of one of those top 4, 5, 6. So it could be real interesting that the way this is going to play out. Now, on the other hand, I'm gonna go ahead and throw this out there too. On the other
Sure.
hand, if it comes down to the top 4 that we knew would be the top 4, and that's what it comes down to, well then, how did this taking 12 teams play out? You know what I mean?
Right. I think without the transfer portal and NIL a little bit, it might be a little more like that, where the big guys are still getting the players, but it's changing a little bit. Now all of a sudden there's a lot more players, a lot more spread out. And you're right. I mean, we'll just take a teams that you take an Alabama that loses 2 games to two really good teams. And let's just say they're like 10 or 11 going into the CFP. There's no way anybody can say they're not going to win at all. They very well might. And they might be, everybody else might be where they are. That pushes them down that list a little bit. So where almost, Ohio State was for the first year, they won it all. So for the most part, 1 through 4 has always had a decent shot historically in the last, 10 years they've been doing this. I think 1 through 12 have an equally a shot to get it done. Was it 5, 6, 7, and 8 got home games against 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. So that's going to be really interesting there. And then, of course, they play the 4 teams on a bye. So really interesting. I still think it's going to be much better than the NFL. It's still going to be good college football, which I'm hoping for. I don't want to see the sport destroyed.
No,
I think the NIL
always better than the NFL.
Yeah, I think the NIL will calm down just a little bit. We've seen the guys flashing their watches at the end of games. I think we'll see some of that on some teams, and we could pick them out if we wanted to, but we know who they are. And other teams, guys that are out there going to be playing football to play football, and that's what's the most important thing.
Absolutely.
Want to win championships, conference as well as national, and it's going to be interesting. I think the numbers are going to be pretty interesting this year. The NFL is going to probably take a look and go, they're getting too big for their britches. But interesting for sure.
Yep, absolutely.
All right, so don't forget Facebook. Give me a like. Give us a like, and then on YouTube, the bell. Subscribe. The bell will give you notifications. We'll be doing this probably every week, and we'll try to find a sweet spot to get it done. amongst our schedules that we have with kids doing sports and all that. But we'll get it done.
Yeah,
So,
our friends out there that that do pick up on us and stuff. Make sure you spread the word. Let them know let them what we're all about. We are hoping to move forward with this a little bit, and next time you see us, we're going to be on ESPN.
no, ESPN's good. Yeah, they'll be calling. We'll be like, yeah, show me some numbers. So, all right, man.
There you go.
So until next time, guys, and we'll see you. Enjoy the news that comes out because there's no games yet, but they'll be coming. And tune in, and we'll see you next time.
Yep, we'll see you.